However, the future of Egypt remains very unclear. And joining us now is Nick Bontis, an award-winning producer. I'm still thinking television. Professor, pardon me, from the DeGroote School of Business. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, Taz.
And I'm sure you've been watching the situation in Egypt very, very closely. The markets reacted very quickly to Mubarak's resignation, and they have now closed. Oil is down $1.15 a barrel. Did you think the price would react that quickly, and where do you think the future of oil is going to go?
Well, I think markets do tend to react very, very quickly, only because, you know, we're living in the Twitter sphere, so everything happens at a lightning pace. With regards to pricing, though, I would have expected a little bit more of a change on gas prices, actually, with our cars. You know, the common person. It's kind of interesting that oil, you know, was so low when it was up to about 147 bucks a barrel. If you recall back a few years ago, gas price was about $1.20. Gas prices just a little bit lower than $1.20, but you know, oil prices are nowhere near their highs. So what that tells me is that even though Mubarak maybe have stepped down, nothing is over in the Middle East. This is just the beginning. If you look at the country itself, it still has fundamental problems, very, very large demographic bulge of young people, and many of those young people are very educated, and there's just not enough jobs to go around. So I don't see this being over by a long shot, Taz.
And I do want to talk about that, because we keep going back to Tahrir Square, and people are celebrating. They are very happy today, and you got to wonder if that is premature, because Egypt is still under military rule. A lot of questions. Will Mubarak stand a trial? Will he be assassinated? So the situation very much in flux there. Do you think oil is going to remain stable, or we've got to watch this?
No, I mean, the reality is when we have instability in the world, that's when we have commodity prices that go up and down. The only thing that'll probably go up for sure probably will be gold, because people tend to fly to gold when there's instability in the markets.
Funny though, gold was down. It closed down
I know,
today.
That's why this market doesn't really make that much sense. I think gold already had pre-adjusted for that type of decision earlier in the week. But when you look at Mubarak, I mean, we have issues with regards to his assets. I just heard that the Swiss banks have all frozen his assets, so he can't even leave the country to get any of his money. And then, you know, it's not just Egypt. There are other countries, I think, that are also actually just on the bleeding edge of problems, too.
In Northern Africa, what countries should we keeping an eye on?
You know, the countries that actually have political leaders where they transfer leadership from father to son are the ones where we have problems. So there's, you know, Syria is an example, Azerbaijan is an example. You know, if you don't have full kind of fledged elections that perhaps are governed by the UN, there's always a problem. You know, in fact, Greece, you know, my homeland, is also another problem where you have the grandfather, the father, and the current son who's prime minister. But in that particular country, they have different economic woes. So with regards to elections, I think what the people in Egypt just want are free elections to make sure that they have a democratically elected leader in place.
So short-term and long-term, where do you see gas prices going? They haven't really adjusted, as you mentioned.
Right. I see gas prices actually staying at the level that they're at. Probably we're going to see a little bit of a denouement, actually a little decrease as things settle down, unless something else happens that's a shock in Egypt, like you mentioned, perhaps even a murder or that type of shock. Then, of course, all bets are off. Things will skyrocket again. So
it's going up is the way that it's moving, if it does move.
Right.
Okay. Google and Facebook reportedly talking to Twitter about buying the social networking service. It's valued at $10 million.
Billion, Daz.
$10 billion, pardon me. With a revenue of $45 million last year.
No revenue.
This is just amazing.
Yeah. Unbelievable. You know, we all know that Google is the big behemoth, and then Facebook kind of came from nowhere, and now they're also a big behemoth. Well, guess what? Twitter's next. They came from nowhere. Now they're going to be a big behemoth. The actual valuation really doesn't make sense. I think, you know, there's a little controversy here. I think that this is all rumors, that in fact probably there is no deal that's going to happen, that Twitter will probably have an IPO, and that they're doing this to create a whole bunch of buzz. That's what Twitter does. They create buzz. They're experts in this world, and by causing all these people to talk about $10 billion, all they're really doing is infiltrating and actually infusing more support for their eventual IPO. Perhaps they're going to actually go public, which is not what Zuckerberg did with Facebook. He kept it private, but maybe Twitter wants an exit strategy.
Do Google and Facebook benefit by Twitter starting these rumors?
Not really, but there's no hurt to them anyway, because they're just so large and they're sitting on so much cash. So Twitter, very, very powerful in my opinion. You know, the new way to communicate. Plus the one other thing that they've got, which is really powerful, is they can actually link the communication with location-based services. So when you're on your smartphone and you're tweeting and people know where you're tweeting from, that's very powerful.
I don't think anyone anticipated just how important Twitter was going to be and the social networking services when they first came out, especially when it comes to the political forum. And we saw this in Egypt, where journalists were getting their message out through Twitter, through, in fact, organizing the protests through Facebook, and even the opposition leader in Egypt is on Twitter. I saw that a couple of days ago. Where do you see the eventual value of Twitter moving towards?
The real power of Twitter is just the lightning speed aspect of communication. It also has multiple platform capability. In other words, you can be on the web in front of a PC, but the real power of Twitter is you can be on your smartphone. 140 characters just with SMS also allows you to communicate and broadcast. And as I mentioned earlier, Taz, with location-based services, there's also a good benefit in terms of emergency situations. So I had heard that also the police force and the military were using Twitter to actually communicate with each other to talk about where the crowds were. Because you can imagine if you're a military officer and you're tweeting, they know that you're at that spot. So if you say this location's having pressure, but that location is not, that's really powerful.
That is very interesting.
Very powerful.
You know what else is interesting? A possible merger, talks of a merger between TMX and the LSC. And we heard about this week. NDP leader Jack Layton has been the most outspoken politician about this. He wants to make sure that it is a merger and not a takeover. Is this a merger of equals in your mind?
Well, let's first talk about the perspective of who cares.
Sure.
Mining companies and resource companies care because if we put Toronto and London together, their access to capital investments skyrockets. So there's more potential for investment. The government doesn't care because they believe that this is a nationalization issue, that Canada needs to have its own stock exchange and that we shouldn't let the Londoners come into play. Frankly, I don't believe in either. The reality is the government's got to be very, very careful here because if they kibosh this deal, just like they did the potash deal, Taz, remember that about a month ago? What that is sending is a signal to the rest of the world saying Canada is not open for foreign business. And I would be very fearful if that's the message the government sends to businesses around the world.
But imagine the reverse. If London was told, hey, we're going to take over your markets, would they be reacting as calmly?
I don't know, maybe it is a Canadian thing that we're polite, but you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where the ownership of the market and the exchange is. We, the average user and businesses, just go to the exchange anyway. Everything's electronic.
It won't affect your portfolio?
It's not going to affect your portfolio. It's not going to affect anything that you do with the stock exchange. In fact, it's probably going to be about efficiencies and making it cheaper. That's what typically these mergers are all about.
Okay, we're running out of time, but I do want to talk about the report on Toyota. Do you think they did a good job in handling this recall business? Because they've had some bad news over the past 10 months, and they're coming out ahead in terms of numbers. So what do they need to do to capitalize on this report and move forward in the next 10 months?
So this is one of those standard PR cases 101. Now that they have the news that they, in fact, were not caused by manufacturer defect, and that there was a couple carpets perhaps or floor mats or something like that, they should come out with another informational campaign to say this. Toyota has always been about safety. Toyota has always been about reliability. That's what we know Toyota for, and you know what? It continues to be about that. So that people are very, very clear. I think the average consumer needs to be clear that Toyota still has that leading position with regards to reliability.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. That is Bontis on Business for this week. Check out his website, nickbontis.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Taz.